Go baby, what's good guys? Yoku here, and today Prydwen just released a new tier list, which if you haven't already seen mine from the previous season or previous patch with Yuzuha and whatnot, we did make one myself, Flossin, as well as Soul. We do have that up on the channel. You can see it here. Yeah, somewhere in a bubble up here. In today's video, we're gonna go over Prydwen's tier list. I was waiting on this for a little bit. I wanted to see where they were gonna place Alice, and I kind of wanted to see some of the reasonings as to why they were gonna do some things, but they changed up a lot drastically, to the point where a lot of what I'm not a fan of has happened, and some changes that I am a fan of have happened. I think I'm a little indifferent about everything, but without wasting too much of your time, let's just jump into it. Are you tired of losing? Are you tired of losing those 50-50s to bullshit? Don't worry, big dog, I got just the deal. Introducing Lootbar, a popular top-up website that offers you purchases up to 23% cheaper. Nani? Now you can score that cool Jafufu without missing a beat. Using Lootbar is actually pretty easy too. All we have to do is pick the pack we want, type in our game UID, make the purchase, and voila. But wait, there's more. Not only does Lootbar use the same in-game routing as Zenless, but they're even working around 7 days a week to provide their own trustworthy service. And because I'm me, just for you guys, I got Lootbar to double down. New users get a 10% off coupon right now. And I also have an exclusive link down below in the description that you can use to get a discount on top of that. Now get out there and go pull that new character. So chat, I don't know if y'all have seen everything going on, but now we get to see it. We have everything here. You guys can see all the placements up front. Damn, Nekomata's tier 4 now. That's crazy. I want to talk about some of the obvious, but I feel like we don't have to pair it too much. Every time we look at one of these tier lists, I do always say Prydwen is not on the same level as Miyabi. The more I've played the game, the more I learn about the game, the more we watch the game, and the more people try and justify this reasoning, the less it makes sense. Prydwen is an amazing character. She's super strong. Some of the comments that I got previously in my own tier list video were saying like, what's the problem with Prydwen sitting in tier 0? If anything, you can just say Miyabi is slightly above Prydwen, or separate them on the tier, right? Order them. Miyabi first, Prydwen second. While I personally have no issues where anyone else puts these characters, because tier lists are subjective, the conversation itself feels a little bit problematic, misinformed, if you will. Miyabi is so strong that she works with every other character in the game. The more you rack your brain around it and the more adept you get at playing this game, no other character in the game works with every single other character. Even Astra, she works with 99% of every other character. Miyabi works with 100% across the board if you know how to play the game. If you know how to play this character, 100% across the board. Miyabi, freeze, broken. With Alice and Yuzuha coming into the mix, that just made her more broken. Vivian's here, Bernice is here, Yanagi's here. She still works with Astra, Lighter, whatever the case may be. She is everything. Miyabi is the strongest and best form of a DPS character we have in the game, which allows her to do way more cracked up stuff. Again, not trying to harp on that too much. We've talked about this every single video time and time again. So if you want to hear more in-depth stuff about Miyabi, my opinions on that with tier 0 and Prydwen, you guys have to watch the other videos. Looking at all the other stuff, I don't think anything else has changed as far as the tier 0 placements, but I do see we're missing the stun category. Everything is support now. I think this is by far one of the worst decisions Prydwen could have made. They already combined defense with support in the first place, and I had an issue with that because not all defense agents are supportive by nature. Now we're just slapping stunners in the same category as support characters, as if stunners are just for supports. I want to see why they did what they did. In this update, we're merging the stun and support categories into one category. The reason behind this is that both character types often fill the same supportive team slots in compositions interchangeably, albeit with slightly different flavors. With this change, stunners and old supports will now be ranked against each other, which we feel is closer to how players build teams in game. I think this little part right here, which we feel is closer to how players build teams in games, this is probably where my issue with this, like the change, resides. And I think maybe what it is, right, where we have to keep in mind the same thing that they had before. Let me go back and find it here. All agents are assumed to be utilizing their best 3-man team, played without mistakes, using our standards for performance. That's the key thing right there. I always have to keep that in mind, is like using their own standards for performance, which also means they still use their own standards for anything else. The problem that I have with that, when I'm addressing it, or rather when a random user or player is looking at this, like they're trying to gather information, not everyone plays or builds teams like this. And then when you do build teams like this, Saying that it's wrong feels a little bit harsh, and I don't want to say that it's wrong because, like I said, it feels harsh, but saying that this is closer to how players build teams in the game isn't accurate. Like, it's not 100% true, and there's no way for anybody to prove it or disprove it. However, when you look into the top performing teams and the top performing players that we have tons of access to, right? You have Billy, you have, with the new translation tool on YouTube now, the JP players are also uploading their content over into YouTube. So we as English viewers now have full access to what they're doing. So we have all this information now that we can see from every single player base, right? The top tier players, the ones who are giving you guys the most information, the ones who are studying the game in and out, in game and through math or through the calcs, they don't play or build teams this way. They don't use stunners for supportive capabilities. Now, this isn't to say that stunners don't support the team or they don't have supportive functions, but no one at this caliber is using a multitude of stunner characters as just another support. Because at that point, this goes back into the same issue that I had with like Starrel. And Starrel, as time went on, I eventually accepted it because it just made more sense that that's how majority of players wanted to play the game. But in Zenless, that isn't the case, especially when you go to the higher tier levels of play. We have new tower now. You're not hyper carrying in tower. The Deadly Assault, you're not hyper carrying a Deadly Assault unless you have a cracked out team and you know what you're doing. What does that mean? It means that you're not going to see somebody casually be able to, across the board, all three, hyper carry every Deadly Assault 1, 2, 3. They're not using stunners to hyper carry throughout all three Deadly Assaults to get the highest score possible, 40, 50, 60K, in that ballpark. They're not doing that. Hyper carry, let's take the double ether combo, the one that I despise, but it works phenomenally. Astra Nicole plus whatever DPS you want to use. Typically, this is going to give you the highest DPS output or score or clear speed if you're looking for that. But with the newer bosses, Jester, for instance, and the same concept applies, or the same rule applies that I had before. Hypercarry's whole thing is to one-shot. You want to kill something as fast as possible. You want to blow up the board as quickly as possible so that you don't have to fight it as long as possible. That's the whole reason that you hyper buff one DPS so that it has all of the damage possible to slap something across the face, and it's done. But if you can't do that, which the average player, the casual player, the one who Prydwen is addressing or making their performance-based scores for, they can't do this. Their average clear speeds 2.3 second or 2.3 minutes to 3 minutes, right? So 2:30 to 3 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, we should be able to see it down here as well. Where do they keep? Here we go. Vivian 2.4, Yuzuha 2.5, Astra 2.8, Miyabi 2.11, Bernice 2.12. These are the average clear speeds that they're gathering from the database that they have access to, right? The information they're using to make up their own scores. Not make up like they made it out of nowhere. I mean, like to put everything in a consolidated place, right? Sanby 233, Zhuyuan 232, Piper 231, Hugo 233, Haramasa 10 minutes plus, Grace 10 minutes plus. This more than likely means they just don't have enough data for these characters because not a lot of players are submitting data for these characters. So it doesn't actually mean that Haramasa takes 10 minutes per one time. But you can see the clear scores, right? The speeds and Shiyu defense. If you come over to Deadly Assault, you can see the same thing. Deadly Assault, you can see the scores, right? With Jafufu, average scores being 31K, Yuzuha 31K, Pan 30K, Ishwin 29K, Astra 27K. The average score for what's going on is closer to an average player, around that 20 to 30K ballpark when it comes to Deadly Assault. These are not the top tier players or the high level players. They're not utilizing team building to the fullest degree or to what would be the more optimal degree, because if they were, their scores would be significantly higher. This is without taking into account mindscapes. You don't need W1s or signature W engines for situations like this or for scores like this. You just need a better understanding of playing the game, playing your team, and what you're fighting against. I'm not trying to come off as some elitist. I know somebody might say that. That's not what I'm doing here. It's more so addressing the fact, like reducing the amount of information that one given player or any given player has, just to consolidate and say all of these characters are the same thing. This thing does that thing. This character does the same thing. A Lighter does what Astra does. Astra does what Yuzu does. Lycan does what Jafufu does. Jafufu does what Nicole does. A random player looking at the tier list is going to look at this. They're not going to differentiate Lighter being a stun character and Astra being a heal and then say, oh yeah, they're all supports, so I just pick if I want heals or if I want stuns. But no one actually plays Astra for heals. So it's like, it's kind of redundant to put that there and then label it all as support. Yuzuha, Aftershock, and Anomaly. Sokaku, being a tier 0.5 support, partner label Miyabi. What the f does that mean for a random player? Nicole, being quick swap. Nicole doesn't even have to play quick swap. Most of the time, you're not quick swapping anyway. She's just blowing shit up. Lycan being stun. Jafufu being Aftershock with partner tag with Ishwin. Trigger being Aftershock and stun. Why would you combine stunners, defense characters, and support characters all in one tier? I understand the concept. Like, I understand why they would do it themselves, but I don't understand why you would think this is a good decision with the reason they gave. It doesn't make sense to me. I know I'm harping on this, right? I know I'm harping on this, guys, but like, as a content creator for Zenless, as somebody that actively like I see things on Reddit, I see things on Twitter, and you can see everybody complain. You see people making videos bitching about like Jester or Miasma. People are still crying about how they can't clear Miasma. One of the reasons is for things like this. If a large majority of players are all under the assumption that something that doesn't do a thing, or it shouldn't be categorized as that thing, is categorized as everything else, they treat it as such. Oh, you need Ishwin to clear Miasma. She's the only one that can do it comfortably. That's not true at all. There's a multitude of different ways to clear Miasma, and very fast, but you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. They don't know. There's so many players who consider themselves casual, average, or they assume they know more than they do, when in reality they don't. And if we reduce that information, it feels like it feels like we're reducing the player's capacity to think and learn. That might just be my problem with that, right? It feels like we're constantly reducing any given player's ability to learn the game, or learn more about the characters, learn more about proper team building, so on and so forth. Leaving stunners where they were was perfectly fine. Just because stunners have supportive capabilities, or rather supportive like crazy ass buffs, doesn't just make them support. Because when you play Astra and she comes out to support, or you play Nicole or Sokaku and she comes out to support, that's all they're doing. But now we get into high level play. I can build Nicole or Sokaku based off my team's needs. The universal build for Nicole, if I'm not mistaken, is still, it's either 4-piece Freedom Blues, maybe they finally changed it, 4-piece Freedom Blues plus 2-piece Swing Jazz, or it's 4-piece Chaos plus 2-piece Swing Jazz, or whatever you want. At one point, before Mono Ice became like the best thing since sliced bread, Sokaku's whole thing was 4-piece Polar Metal, or I guess we're on 4-piece Astral now, but 4-piece Polar Metal, or some supportive set. All you're doing is passing her buff to the next character. But now, because Mono Ice players figured more shit out, Sokaku wants Freedom Blues. That's not benefiting Miyabi at all. I mean, I guess it is because Frost counts as ice, so whatever, but point being is that you're not passing a buff. It's for you to get faster freezes. Why would you want faster freezes? Because freeze is broken. Freeze stops everything. If you stun somebody and they have 1% stun meter left and they're stuck in stun, you freeze them, that's it. You keep that 1% and you do whatever damage you can during that freeze. This is where you get those combos with Ellen in particular. Ellen loves doing this. You freeze them and you pop ult. Why? Because if you're popping, as long as the animation is going on, something like that, it'll keep the freeze. So you can do things where you freeze them, Miyabi ult, and she keeps the whole freeze. You freeze them with Sokaku and you EBA, and she keeps the whole freeze. Hypothetically, you freeze them and Evelyn's doing her chain attack or her ult, you keep the whole freeze. We're diminishing players' level of learning and understanding, and I don't like that, because it perpetually keeps us in a situation where instead of promoting getting better at the game, we're trying to tell people like to dumb it down. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be doing that. I'm not gonna harp on that too much longer. I know I really did rant on that, but you guys can tell I'm just not a fan of that change at all. Finishing what they said though, to highlight the difference in style between old supports and stun units, we are adding a new stun tag. See, there's no reason to do that. Honestly, I would have accepted if they said something like, and I see they're removing other tags as well. They should not have done that. I would have accepted if they said we want to condense the amount of screen space or real estate on the screen, so we're condensing categories. I would have accepted that much more than the reason they're giving right now. let's carry on. Looking at the actual tiers, I think last time we talked about Yuzu deserving of M0 or tier 0. Her and Astra are the only two supports that are tier 0. Lighter being tier 0 as a stunner, yes. Look at Etheria, there's no excuse for removing the tabs. Is Etheria different? Oh my god. Lucifer, why did you show me this? We were done, we were over it, we were moving on. Why did you show me this? What? Are they serious? At this point, I just think Zenless is the uncared for child. Like, you know that kid that you have, or you see, like, you don't have these, please don't have these. You know the kid that you see in like cartoons or like really bad sitcoms, and it's always the one that's like super annoying because they want attention because you don't really recognize that they might be autistic or they just want attention. And so you're like, go away, little Timmy, here, take this toy, go play over there on the couch. That's how I feel like they're treating Zenless right now. That's what I feel like, bro. Like, bruh, this is crazy. And it's only, my feelings towards this are only this way. Like, I'm so passionate about it because when you sit here and you actually look, even if you don't decide to be sweaty, you don't have to be sweaty to learn, right? I think it's very moronic when people try and dehumanize or demonize wanting to learn or get better at something that you actually give a fuck about. Like, trying to belittle somebody for learning something that they care about is stupid as fuck. Learning more about Zenless, which does not take you 67 hours a day to do, you will eventually understand, and very quickly, this game has so much more depth to it, and team building is a skill in this game. How do I know that? What representation do I have to even mention that? What kind of concept would I talk about? Let's talk about Alice, Yuzuha, and any other anomaly agent in the game. If I'm trying to condense information, I'm gonna tell you some really basic shit. What am I gonna say? I'm gonna say Alice, Yuzuha, and Yanagi, Bernice, Vivian, Miyabi, Sokaku, or Jane, Piper, or Lucy, or Grace, or Rena. All of them play the exact same. They all you have to do is do EBA, swap to the next character, build up your meter, do another EBA. I am fucking somebody in the worst way possible. I'm not teaching them shit. They're not learning nothing because Alice and Miyabi play completely differently than Alice and Vivian. Alice and Vivian play slightly differently than Alice and Bernice. And then those two in particular, right? Those two teams, what's funny about that is, whereas I think that team using Alice with Vivian or with Bernice, I think that is the easiest pick up and play Alice team on the board right now. The Eastern player base actually believes it's the hardest because it has the most meter management. However, there's another layer of management that the guide should be out by the time this video comes out, so you guys can go and watch that Alice guide, and I talk about it briefly in there, or in more depth. I'll talk about it briefly here. Anomaly management is a completely different aspect. It's still meter management, but it's like a subsidiary to it, right? Anomaly management is the bar. It's your stacks. It's how close you are to popping something. It's keeping track of your ICD, when you're doing what and why. How much damage do you get? The anomalies, even though they're not elemental reactions, so we don't pay attention to them the same way, the anomalies still have traits, specific traits to what they got going on. If you pop burn over ice, it's a different reaction. It's a different effect. If you pop physical over burn or burn over physical, it's a different effect. All of this stuff falls under anomaly management, and that's what helps you build or play anomaly teams significantly better. Attack type teams don't have this management meter to worry about. They just have regular meter management and maybe their own stacks, right? Like Evelyn with her tethers and whatnot. So making that as a hyper carry makes so much more sense. Simplifying an attack type DPS or team makes so much more sense. But Anomaly being the #1 or top tier DPS that we have, the top 3 DPS in the game, I'll even say top 5. The top 5 DPS, a third of them are Anomaly. A third of the top DPS in the game are Anomaly. At some point, you have to learn how to play this team or you just don't do it, right? For the most part, if I ignore support and stun and defense as one single tier, Alice being in tier 5, I did not expect that. I believe Alice is a tier 5 unit, but I thought they were going to do the same thing they did with Ishwin, and they were going to watch list Alice and then they were gonna put her on tier 0 along with Ishwin and Miyabi. I will be reading this to see like maybe why they didn't do that, even though I don't think they should have, but I do want to know why they didn't. Evelyn being in tier 0.5, but with an expert tag, I still don't agree with this expert tag. Even if you play Evelyn at the most optimal, she's just not on the same level. That's no shade to her at all. She's an amazing character, and she's one of the very few in tier 0.5 that has earned it and deserve it. Hugo being here, I'm surprised they haven't put a watch list on him. Yeah, 233, I'm really surprised they haven't slapped him with a watch list yet, because Sanbi got her watch list and then she dropped. Duyuin dropped immediately, like there was no watch list for her. So I'm surprised Hugo doesn't have a watch list plus a drop. That's very interesting to me. Yanagi being in tier 0.5, absolutely. Also being in tier 0.5 for secondary DPS. After like super playing Yanagi, especially with Alice being here, they either need, I believe Prydwen should put a watch list on Yanagi for secondary DPS. I think Yanagi has earned tier 0. She was tier 0 before. I think she's like inarguable, indisputable. She's in that spot. Personally, Custard, I do believe and again, not simplifying the game. These two characters, even though they're still anomaly characters and they fall under a sub DPS category, play completely differently. The way that you play these characters as a sub DPS on any given team is drastically different. You maximize Yanagi's damage output by being more aggressive, more calculated with your decision making. But with Vivian, it's a lot more simple. It's a lot more off field. And what I've learned, or what I've come to realize, I said this in a previous Prydwen video as well, it seems like the less you have to play a character, the more they value that character. Miyabi is tier 0, period. Even if you don't learn Mono Ice, even if you don't learn all the cracked up stuff that she has to offer, she is still tier 0. You can mash, close your eyes, and jack off, and Miyabi is still gonna do some fucking work. Ishwin, you have to learn her kit, or at least how to use her, which means some of your inputs need to be a lot cleaner, 50-50. Vivian, evolved version of Bernice, you don't actively have to play Vivian. They value her very highly. Astra, same thing. Lighter, same thing. Mostly the same. Yuzuha, same thing. The tier 0 characters on Prydwen's list, for the most part, all have that one thing in common. You have to play them the least to continue getting some of their top tier performance. Then you go a step down and you actually have to play these characters. Alice, you have to play Alice. Evelyn, you have to play Evelyn. Hugo, you have to play Hugo. And Nagi, you have to play her. Bernice as well, right? Evolved version of Vivian. Before Vivian got here, Bernice was in tier 0. You don't have to play Trigger, but the difference is they're still counting no signature W engines. So because Trigger's whole thing was like, yo, I shred through people's defense for free, she doesn't have that built into her kit. Whereas with Lighter naturally has, are you a fire type? Are you an ice type agent? Okay, well, I'm gonna give you plus 9 million benefits. If Trigger had something like that wasn't exclusive to Aftershock, and let's say that she had her defense shred with her W engine, she was still an Aftershock unit, but then let's say she did the same thing Lighter did before electric agents, they would also put Trigger in tier 0. Lycan is not a tier 0.5 stunner. Lycan he does not stun on the same caliber. He does not offer the same benefits that Jafufu does. If anything, you could say he's close enough to Trigger without her engine, but I know the community is not going to accept that. The community was just arguing that Trigger was better than Lighter. Now you're telling me that Trigger and Lycan are in the same caliber? How did Trigger go from being better than Lighter, according to the community, but now she's on the same tier as Lycan? It doesn't make sense. Lycan is only up here because Sokaku is up here because of Mono Ice. Yet he doesn't have the partner tag, just like Sokaku does. Nicole, absolutely valid in being tier 0.5. Some of you guys were asking me about Evelyn. I think either you maybe misheard me or you didn't fully understand what I'm saying. Tier 0.5 is an amazing tier. This is S tier. There's nothing wrong with Evelyn being in tier 0.5, and by no means am I calling her weak or lesser than for tier 0.5. What I'm saying is Evelyn is not as strong as Miyabi. This should not be an argument. There's never a point in time where anybody should be arguing whether or not Evelyn or Miyabi is better than the other. The answer is always Miyabi. So when you ask a question like, why don't I think Evelyn is that good? It's because there is no argument. Miyabi does everything that Evelyn can do, minus the specific chain attack combos, obviously, but you replace that with her enhanced basic attacks. And then she does more. Evelyn burn can't freeze. You can't stop the timer. At most, you can extend it, and you can only extend it with lighter. One of the key ways that I like to explain like what happens when it comes to prioritizing a character or categorizing a character, Miyabi does all of this stuff by herself. She doesn't need anyone else to reach the potential that she has. Giving her more units further increases that potential. Whereas these other characters, once you start saying things like, well, if you give Evelyn her premium team, Evelyn plus lighter, Evelyn with Astra can reach Miyabi levels of damage, can reach Miyabi levels of performance. The moment you start adding things to the other character who reach this single character, they're not on the same caliber. I don't have an issue with her being tier 0.5. I didn't say she should go lower. I said her with an expert tag, even with her at the best fucking level that you can play Evelyn, still does not meet the best fucking level that you could play Miyabi. There's an entirely different tier between these characters. That's why I'm saying this expert tag, because what this expert tag represents based off their own use of the expert tag, it means that if you play this character cracked out of her mind, she is on the same level as these other characters. She now jumps into tier 0, but that's not true. That's not what happens at all. And I constantly have to do this when I look at Prydwen or talk with anyone that's like an average player, a casual player, whatever. Not like a derogatory term. I'm just saying like the terms so that people understand. I constantly have to separate high level performance or high player skill versus I'm just playing to get my rewards. When I think about it that way and I'm saying like, okay, I'm just playing the game to get my rewards, it's totally fine. At that point, you don't even care about a tier list. You just care about who's the easiest for you to get these rewards. Who's on element so you can get the best rewards as easy as possible. That's what you really care about. And that's how I leave the conversation. But that's not really what we're talking about right now. We're talking about reducing the information. Even this conversation that we're having, where we're talking about Miyabi and Evelyn and like why I wouldn't believe expert level Evelyn or expert played Evelyn is on the same tier as Miyabi. It's because the information that all of us have by now, the Mono Ice Bible, there's no Evelyn Bible. And even if there was a Bible, but I guess maybe let me clarify. I'm not trying to say that the Bible existing all of a sudden makes Miyabi better. What I'm saying is because the Bible exists and all the amount of information that somebody put into this thick ass Bible for Mono Ice, but there isn't one that exists for Evelyn because that amount of skill doesn't go into the character or to the team. It doesn't exist. Do you think that Alice should get an expert tag? Probably not, if I'm being completely honest, because then I would argue the same thing with Evelyn. Playing Alice at the most optimal degree, she still doesn't reach Miyabi levels without a teammate. And that's the key difference, right? I don't think we fully understand like how broken Miyabi actually is. Freeze. It also doesn't count as regular ice, which means you get 2 freezes. She can clear her own frostburn. Alice is way more, yeah, exactly, Matrix. Alex is way more conditional in order to get to this level of doing these things. And again, this doesn't mean she's not great. This doesn't mean she's not a fantastic unit. And it doesn't mean she's not tier 0.5. I absolutely agree with her being tier 0.5. She's just not on Miyabi's level. And I think that's a conversation that like, I don't know what it is about like gacha players in general. Whenever you mention something isn't on blank level and you give justified reasons as to why, we have to argue like, nah, that's not true. Like this is my favorite unit, so she has to be on that level. No, they're just not. I know I'm harping about this, guys. I really do. I apologize for both the stream and for the video. But if we finish up, we get down here to tier 1. My only gripe with this, which Jane jumping up to tier 1, absolutely. Jane needs to be on a watch list. Also, too, you just asked that question, right? Why play Alice or Jane when you have C6 Piper? This is another misconception that we have come to because we've simplified the information. Piper is not on the same tier as these other 2 characters. Piper sure as fuck isn't on the tier as Alice. Not even just Alice. Now with Vivian, Bernice, Yanagi, Astra, Yuzuha, Jane is officially above Piper. Piper can't crit her anomalies. And it's very important that we talk about that. With the amount of defense shred we have existing in the game, the new Jane build getting very popular now with the penetration ratio, These two characters aren't on the same level. I don't believe Piper should have jumped up here to tier 1 with Jane. But because we're so used to, as a community, saying exactly what you just asked, right? C6 Piper is basically the same, if not better than Jane in a lot of situations. This comes down to misinformation, or I don't even say misinformation, a lack of information. The simplification of information. Why would Jane and Piper be on the same build? The answer is simple, because you're not correctly playing Jane. Oh, Jane is easy to play, you just mash. The proper way to play Jane is to enter passion state and never leave it. That's a very difficult thing to do. That is a very difficult thing to do. To keep passion state for the entirety of your fight, or at least 90 to 95% of your fight, that's not easy. Piper is really easy to play, so you go with it. The new Jane build depends on her teammates, and so who are they? Well, based off what we just, where was it at? Criteria, all agents are assumed to be utilized in their full best 3-man team. Jane's best team right now fluctuates, but predominantly, it's gonna be Jane and Yuzu, or it's gonna be Jane and Astra, depending on your third. Regardless of who you're using, but predominantly with Yuzu, Jane Yuzu, you're rocking penetration ratio. You also, because depending on if you're, and it depends, right? Team building. If you're swinging Yuzu's buff into Jane, you no longer even need anomaly mastery. I know that's crazy, but you don't need it. You can run attack percent now, and you get more damage on top of your crit because it evens out. If you swing Yuzu's buff into your other characters, so Yanagi for whatever reason, or Vivian, or even Alice with monophysical, you keep anomaly mastery on Jane, but now you still receive the same Astra level attack buff that you would get from Astra. You still receive all the user hop benefits except the swing through, of course, and you keep the penetration ratio. You keep all your physical damage bonus, you get more attack, and you penetrate through the enemy with 24 to 32%. Team building is a skill, and it becomes a skill, or rather a learned skill, the more you learn and understand about the game. Even I'm not a master at team building. I'm learning every day that I turn on Zenless, every day that I watch a video, every day that I engage with another creator or a theory crafter or a player, I'm learning. Why is Ishwin in tier 0 with Miyabi? Recency bias, she's easy to play, does a crap ton of damage. The content is currently being shielded by her, and for whatever reason, we refuse to just leave Miyabi alone and unanimously accept she is the only one that's in her tier. So it creates a Void Hunter-like versus Void Hunter because the game said so. I don't know, but that's kind of there. Haramasa's tier 1.5, still don't agree with that, but you know, not playing the character, that's a thing. Partner with Soldier 11 and Lighter, agreed. Yeah, I could agree with this. Anton T3, Nekomata and Ben, man, that's rough. The niche characters are very rough to tier because like they are niche, but whether or not they deserve that tier because they're niche is a little different. However, at M0 Neko, yeah, you could probably get away with that. M0 Grace, understandable. And M0 Coleta does just fine, to be honest. But because they condensed everything into support, defense, and a stun, well, now they drop. Seth being over here in tier 3. Seth, especially in an anomaly centralized meta, Seth should be minimum tier 2, tier 1.5 with an expert tag. If you're not gonna give him the expert tag, just slap him in 1.5, but that's what he deserves. Coleta should be tier 2 minimum. And yeah, Hoodie, for Nekomata to work, you basically need M1. Like if you really want her to work without you doing a lot of work, you need M1. You know, you want her W engine as well. King Yi still being tier 1. When Lycan is up here in tier 0.5, when Trigger is up here in tier 0.5, when Ishwin's best team, here's the thing, right? Ishwin's best team isn't Jafufu, or rather, let me clarify. It's not just Jafufu. Ishwin has shown that she can perform at a kill deadly assault and clear sub 1 minute Shiyu defense level with not just Jafufu, not just Trigger, but also with Qing Yi. In fact, the most consistent results have Qing Yi on the team. Why is she still in tier 1 and these other characters are in tier 0.5? We don't have expert tags on, because, and again, or rather finalizing everything here. We're wrapping this up. At a base level, almost every character in the game would have an expert tag on it. This is why I'm saying reducing the amount of information you're trying to teach and educate people on about Zenless Zone Zero does more harm to the entire like community than it does good. Very few characters are like simple, mash a couple buttons, get top tier results. At some point, you gotta learn what you're doing. Everybody can't have the expert tag, so it doesn't make sense. But everyone, you have to learn everyone. You know what I mean? And it blows me that this is like become the norm. But anyway, I think this was more of a ranting plus tier review. So I do apologize for that, guys, but we're gonna wrap this here up. Most of the placements I agree with. The ones that I called out, I don't agree with, and I think they should change. And Lament, you might be right. You might actually be right, right? The problem and the way that I'm looking at it, or rather the problem with the way that I'm looking at it, it might be a problem because the amount of nuance that I'm looking for at that point would be a spreadsheet. And just to kind of add into that, while I don't disagree with you, I feel like a game like Zenless giving us the amount of information it does, and actively, from even the developers, they're actively encouraging us to learn the game. We should be doing our best to do so. Instead of promoting to diminish the information we receive or learn, we should be promoting to learn it. And obviously there are some things that you like overloading, right? Some information you can overload. Mono ice. We're not going to talk about mono ice in a tier list and then tell you why you should learn mono ice and blah, 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 blah. That's overloading information. You leave that to, if I click on Miyabi's character tab, I come over here and I look into the build. This is where you teach me about mono ice, teams and synergies. This is where you teach me about mono ice. The fact that mono ice isn't here, but it is here. You teach me this here, but over here in the tier list, it should at least be represented so that I can look for the information. I know to go look for the information. But if it's a random player, right? A brand new player, whatever. If I don't know to look for the information, I'm never gonna get that help. This is how you get people on Twitter asking you, hey guys, I just built Alice, I just pulled Miyabi, and I'm not able to clear Shiyu defense. I'm not able to clear Deadly Assault. I'm only getting 12K. What am I doing wrong? And then you look at their shit and their builds all fucked up, their stats are fucked up. They're playing teams with Alice, Evelyn, and Vivian. Oh, well, this is what I thought worked together because of some bullshit they read. The information is not being given to them in a mass, you know what I mean? Anyway, Smogon writes articles and they attach them to each and every Pokemon that they're talking about that has a, I guess you could use the term controversial, but it's really not controversial. If this Pokemon is popular, if it's strong, if there's a reason to argue about its strengths and meta, its placement, Smogon writes an entire article. Even better, Smogon, whenever they're trying to figure out if they're gonna ban somebody or place them in a tier, they actually make you fight for it. I used to hate this when I was younger because I didn't have the time to do it. But now when I got older, right, as I got older, it made so much more sense. If you can't put in the work to show and justify why you need to be able to speak on this topic, speaking on Smogon, right? If you want to argue and give your vote or opinion as to why Zacian needs to be banned to Ubers, in order for you to do that, you need to put in the work. You need to play ranked and reach a certain criteria, a certain tier. You need to show them that you have the skill to back up the information that you're gonna be talking about. And Lament, I'm with you on that. I never take away credit from Prydwen. I always say, like, the amount of work that goes into them making the tier list is a lot. I understand it's a lot. I've gone on record and said at some point Prydwen needs to expand the fuck out of their team, or they need to stop adding games, because it's physically impossible for the same 5 or 7 people to play every single game at the caliber it takes to know and understand at least 80% of what goes on in that game. You feel me? It's crazy. It's crazy to even think that they could do that. When Zenless first came out, I remember, because Grim was the one that was doing everything for Star Rail and for Zenless. And at that time, I told them, this game is not going to be like Star Rail. You can't just calc. You have to learn how to play. And I remember Grim and I going back and forth. It lasted for like a day or two. We went back and forth about, funnily enough, Soldier 11. And at the time, I told him, I said Soldier 11 is going to be a great DPS character, especially free to play, and she's probably going to be the best free to play DPS in the game if you learn her input timing. Which, for those that don't know, which everyone should by now, but if you're a newer player, you might not know that. Soldier 11 has this thing in her passive. When triggering fire suppression during an attack, she increases her damage, right? Boom. Fire suppression is when flames are on her sword. Naturally, you would assume, where is it at? Her skill. She presses EX skill. Soldier 11's basic attacks and dash attacks will trigger fire suppression up to 15 seconds or 8 times. A player is going to read that and they're going to naturally assume, especially like a Hoyoverse player, a gacha game player, they're going to naturally assume press skill, do fire suppression, get good damage. Cool. But then you look into this basic attack fire suppression. Press attack at the right moment to activate, unleash a set of more powerful slashes, dealing fire damage. This doesn't tell you directly that it is the same thing as this. However, the name is the same. When I played Zenless and I discovered that, I said, oh, she's got a fighting game mechanic. You have to time the input. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I told Grim that. Grim said, nah, that's not right. That's not how that works. Like, you just mash it, use skill, use ult, you mash. I said, Grim, learn the timing. I guarantee you it's the same thing. He learned it, or rather he did it on accident. And he said, well, it can't be the same damage. I said, Grim, there's no other form of multiplier in her kit. That's the only fire suppression in her kit for the basic attack. I'm telling you, that's what it is. He did it in a day. It took him a day. He came back to me and he apologized. Not like we were mad at each other or anything like that. You know, we were just speaking on the terms or speaking on the what happened. But he told me, you were right. I see now that this game has a little bit more depth to it than I gave it credit for. From that point forward, for the next 2 patches that Grim was working on the game, him and I back and forth. If he had questions about how a character played, we talked about it. We even had a whole conversation, which he ended up showing me the best way for that was with Ellen. If I'm not, they might still have it here in the combo, if I'm not mistaken. No, okay, it's different now. It's different because of the change. So originally, the original combo that they had in here was you start off with like stun or chain attack. You do EX special, which is tail swipe. You do BA3 and you loop it. EX special, BA3, EX special, BA3. At the time, I was telling him, nah, dude, you want to do EX special Shark Nami BA3, EX special Shark Nami ult. And he's like, I don't think you have time to do that in a stun window. And I said, well, you do if you freeze. I didn't even understand freeze to the fullest potential at the time. But point being is that we went back and forth on that. He did the math. We did the testing together. And we found out, right? He was right. EX special BA3, EX special BA3 in the ult did more damage. And it took less time. It fit the right amount of time for the stun window. The exact stun window timing. That was how you got the most damage out of Ellen. Pre 2.0. You're right. But that's what you need. You have to have people on your team that are willing to look into the game mathematically and in game and go back and forth and figure this stuff out. When you don't have that, and on top of that, when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 different games running through one website, there is no way the small team of Prydwen is running up every single one of these games at a pro level or top player level or in-depth enough level for every single one of these games. At some point, they got to get more help or they got to start dropping games, you know? But I get it. Prydwen is the #1, at least globally, right? English speaking, the #1 website used to learn about games, who's the meta or what's meta, the best builds, things like that. But that's it. I'm out of here, boys. Thank y'all for watching today's video. What up, Custard? How you doing? Also, yeah, no, dude, you didn't interrupt it because we just finished. That's 500 biddies. God damn. I appreciate that. Not trying to interrupt your flow, but I just wanted to say thank you for introducing me to the godly comp that is Alice, Miyabi, and Yuzaha in your guide. This comp is probably the most skill expressive and dopamine-filled comp I have ever tried, and we'll be trying to figure it out for my future runs. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's a really crazy comp. It's super fun. It's one of those more unorthodox things, but it just works, and I like it. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, do leave a like, comment down below. all that fun stuff. We made this one right under an hour, so we'll see how it performs. Oh, and then obviously, guys, keep the comments respectful, please. Y'all have been doing great so far, YouTube. You guys have been doing really good so far. Keep the comments respectful. I can't say my user outro because it's inappropriate for YouTube. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Smell you later.